Hello, my friends, and welcome to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are making a fat quarter quilt. So grab your fat quarters and come on and enjoy the show. Okay, my friends, and we have selected our stack of fat quarters. We brought them over to the ironing board. We're going to press them out, then bring them over to the cutting board and get started on our quilt. And we are going to have fun today because we're going to cut these fat quarters in 3 different directions and just mix and match and have fun. Okay, my friends, and we are cutting a fat quarter up into 18 by 6.5, 7.5 by 10.5, and 10.5 by 10.5. Very exciting. So that takes the 3 blocks out of the fat quarter and gives us just a tiny bit to put in our scrappy quilt coming up. And we're going to lay each of these blocks out. We have a total of what do we have? 3 times 4, 12 blocks planned. So that's 12 fat quarters to create this quilt. And we are not paying any mind to how they go together. So we're using 12 different fat quarters and creating 12 different blocks just like this. And then we're going to twist them and twist them and twist them and twist them and put them into a quilt together. So let's grab these, pop back over to the sewing machine. And we're using our poster board as an extension to our sewing table. And we're matching up the sides of our blocks. And we're going to sew them together. And the first 2 we sew together are I believe the 2 10.5-inch blocks. One by 10.5 and one by 7.5. We're just going to give it a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to sew these down, add the 3rd block to the top. We're going to do the entire stack of fat quarter blocks just the same way. And after each piece, we can finger press the top to add the 3rd piece because we only have the 1 seam. And then we go over to the ironing board and we press the block because, again, that block is only going to have 2 seams in the entire block. Is that correct, Sylvia?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This seam here and the seam here.
Very good. All right.
But we always put it where we can see the seam on the bottom.
Okay.
If there's no seams in one side, you'll want the seam side up so you can always make sure it stays turned the way you've got it pressed.
Very good.
Just looking to make sure it's staying the way I've had it. I think it is. You always want your edges to match up, but on straight ones you don't necessarily have to use a pin. As long as you make sure that you check it occasionally.
Trim down that ending piece at the cutting board. That just would have been one more quick cut. But again, we're just using a fat quarter, cutting it 3 times to create these 3 blocks to go together. So it's a quick fat quarter quilt. We're using 12 fat quarters. And we'll go ahead and do the next block and then bring them over to the ironing board when we get a couple of them ready to be pressed. And we're just finger pressing that just to show off its beauty for the camera. Oh, they're so adorable. And I love these crayons. You ever count sheep when you go into bed? Look at those butterflies. Okay, let's grab the next one.
Just divide
Okay,
it
and the
up.
rest of the three fat quarters, we're doing 3 at a time. And we're going to grab them out, swap their sides around. And it's easy to tell who goes with what because we've got to have a different color in each of our blocks. And all 3 of them are cut to a different size measurement. So we're just flip-flopping these around. So where we have 3 different kinds in one block. And then we're going to sew our fat quarter pieces together. Okay, and Sylvia, which one do we do first?
We do the 10.5 and the 10.5 by 7.5.
Excellent, okay. Okay, and then we're matching it up with our longest piece, right sides together, matching our edges. After we finger pressed it, then we're flipping it upright. So, well, we're flipping it over so the seam side remains on the top. So we know which way the seam is going, and we make sure. It's always best if you can eyeball your seams and have the seams face up, and that way you and your sewing machine knows which way they're going, correct?
Correct.
And Sylvia, we definitely love having you on Where Wendy Creates. So, my friends, Sylvia, my mother, always happy to have Mom on video with us as we like to create and sew, generally at the same time if we can, when we can.
Right. And I love to make patterns too.
And Sylvia has made several of the patterns that's online in other videos, so make sure you check those out. When I do post them, I'm Wendy, and when I do post them on Where Wendy Creates or Where Wendy Travels, Where Wendy Creates, you have free use of these patterns. We do not charge for the patterns. And oftentimes you'll see me make a quilt, so sometimes we may alter it in the progress, but we'll definitely like it when you use our patterns and create beautiful objects for yourself, because we are here on this channel just to inspire. We love doing what we do. We want you to love doing what you do. And here we go, just that quick, my friends. We have the second block. So let's go ahead and do the third block in this pattern, and then I'm going to take you off of the camera. We'll finish up the other 12 minus 3, 9 fat quarters, and we will come back and show you the quilt being laid out, and then we'll stitch it up real quick. So we're going to do this block just the same way we did the others. So we will see you real soon, because we cannot wait to show you the layout. Coming up next. And we're pressing each of our blocks. And we're going to come back and lay them out. Woot woot! Hello, my friends, and welcome to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are making another scrappy quilt. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you do, because we have so many found fabrics that we are piecing together for children's quilts, and it is coming up soon. So any size pieces you have, lots of scrappy quilts coming up. Okay, my friends, and this is the audition of the layout. So we still have to move some blocks around, but we have laid them out. And now we're going to switch them around. Like, see our little matches up here? We've got to spread them out to where they all look right. So we are doing so well. I'm so excited. And let's go ahead and move a couple blocks around. And we're looking at having a border around the quilt that's multicolor. And we have these two fat quarter packs that we got, 5 pieces each for $5 at the Dollar Tree, my friends. Incredible. So again, we're going to consider, we're auditioning these right now, and I think they really fit well with this quilt. So let's go ahead and start putting these blocks together, and then we can really give more consideration to our borders. Yay! And we're going to go ahead and sew 2 of our strips together. And because these are fat quarters cut into 3 pieces with just a little bit of leftover, they are very easy to seam together because they have very few seams. We just got to make sure that we're lined on smooth. We keep true to our 1/4 inch, and we take our time sewing. So lining us up proper. So again, this is a very easy quilt with our fat quarters. So if you need to whip something up real fast, you've got grandkids coming over, or maybe even a neighbor has her grandkids coming over to stay for a while, this might be a tremendous gift. Again, we're just using 12 fat quarters, mix and match in children's colors. And we are cutting them in 3 different ways, sewing them together, and creating a beautiful patchwork quilt. Not quite a nice buy, but we can definitely use it as such, and talk about the different caricatures, crayons, and other things inside of our quilt. So again, right sides together, we've sewn those 2 blocks together, and we're going to keep on sewing the others just the same. And another block connected. Okay, and it's back to the ironing board. We have 3 blocks put together, and now we're going to go ahead and press those seams. And we do like using a hot iron set on cotton setting, because we are using quilters cotton fabrics. And of course, a little steam just helps it go that much quicker.
And what we do is we press it toward the one long seam, because it's the one that does not have a break in it, so the seams go toward it.
because again, when you're stitching that quilt top, batting and backing together, the least amount of seams that you have to go over at one time, the smoother the fabric, the less bulk, the less possibility of popping a needle. And that reminds me, y'all, hit the subscribe now button, because we have an upcoming tutorial where we're going to be making pinwheels for a quilt, and talking about seams and laying flat seams. That pinwheel quilt is really where that information is vital. All right, pressing it on this side real quick, and then we're back to the sewing machine with 2 rows to put together. And we're putting our 2 strips out on the bed so we can go ahead and start pinning them together. And my friends, when we start doing rows, it's a good thing to go ahead and number your rows. That way you always have an idea of where they go, because these quilts that we put together, sometimes you don't want light colors going right next to each other. So if we put these numbers on it with a quick pen, it keeps us in line. Okay, my friends, now we're looking at putting 2 rows together. So we need to pin it on every seam so that our seams lay flat. But to keep us perfectly lined up, the only 2 seams that are going to match on this quilt are just the 2 where the 2 blocks come together. So we want to make sure that is smooth and even. Once we pin these 2 places that are perfectly even, we're going to go ahead and do it on every place that we have a seam, just to make sure that seam is always laying in the proper direction. Just matching up our seams and sticking a quick pin in it. And then we'll do where our other 2 blocks come together, and then we'll come back and do on each individual seam. And often here, Sylvia does use 2 pens holding both seams down at the same time. And that way she's solid that it's going to be right on point, matched up, lined up perfectly there, setting together. And then 1 pen on each side of that seam to hold the seam allowances in the correct direction. Then, of course, we come back and we're going to pin it on both ends and at every seam. Now, if the seams are too far apart and you feel like you need another pin, by all means, yes, put in another pin. But is it necessary? It's probably not necessary, but it's the comfort of how you hold the quilt. Just make sure those seams are pinned. And that way you're going to stay perfectly straight and everything is going to be lined up very well. We're going to keep pinning this and bring it over to the sewing machine. And my friends, when we are sewing a quilt, we'd like to sew it 2 rows at a time. And then we'll sew half of the quilt together, and then the other half of the quilt together, and then we'll bring both 2 halves of the quilt to the sewing table and sew that final seam across. And why we do that is really to distribute the bulk of the quilt so we don't have it pulling or torquing or otherwise being very difficult. If we have it evenly weighted, evenly laid flat, it's so much friendlier on us bringing it to the sewing machine and stitching those sides together than if we had 6 rows and then we're adding a 7th and final row. So I hope that makes sense. We're balancing the weight so the weight of the quilt doesn't pull down and torque us and pull our 1/4 inch seams off or make it more difficult to handle with only 2 hands. And if you have a nice sewing machine, please go slow over those seams. Pull out the pins prior to getting to that seam. And when I say prior to that seam, a 1/2 inch. You just don't want to run over the pen and risk popping the needle in the machine and causing problems. Oh my goodness, this quilt is so cute. So cute. You know, I didn't think about it, but this would also be a tremendous thing to have in the back seat on a trip. Just a quick snuggle comfort of your own quilt, especially, you know, the kids' fabric if we have kids in the car. And just a wonderful, quick gift that anyone would be happy snuggling in. Does not have to be a birthday or a holiday to receive a quilt. Oh, and we are spot on. Okay, 2 rows sewn together, and we're off to the races for the rest, and then we'll come back for the final. Okay, now we have all 4 of our rows together, laid out. We're going to take the 2 rows on the bottom, the 2 rows on the top, lay them together, and pin them. So we're bringing them down, turning them right sides together, wrong sides out facing us. And we're going to go ahead and pin those seams just like we did for the rows. And if y'all don't have one of these nifty little things, this is just a plastic container that has metal in it. It's absolutely wonderful for your pens. So you might want to consider picking those up, one of those up. Magnet. Did I not say magnet? Magnet.
You said metal.
Ah, magnet in the middle to hold our pens. So funny. Magnet. And now we're going to go ahead and pin on the edge of our blocks. And then we're going to pin at our seams just like we did for each individual row. And then again, by doing this, we have half of the bulk on the bottom, half of the bulk on the top. It's split in half evenly, so it's not going to torque as much on us as it would if we had the 3 rows together and then adding the final one by itself. So always consider that, my friends. Do the top, do the bottom of the top of the quilt, and then sew the 2 together. Use pens for accuracy, especially the longer rows you have, the more accurate you're going to be, and those seams are going to line up usually only, if you use the pens. Okay, and we have taken our quilt and folded it over so the bulk is on itself, much more easy to manage. And we're starting on our final edge to sew the entire quilt top together. After you've done this a few times, you won't worry about getting stabbed by the pens as you go along. You're just conscious, and eventually your fingers know where they're at, so you don't have to worry about getting stuck. And believe it or not, you actually get used to being stuck, and you don't scream as much. Right, Sylvia?
Correct. Out of bobbin.
Oh, we're out of bobbin. Well, that happens, my friends. So we are going to stop here. Look at her. Within 2 inches of sewing, she knew she was out of bobbin.
The sound.
The sound. So that is a trick that my heavy-duty singer doesn't give me. So we are moving back to probably the brother for our next quilt. And, of course, she is using this beautiful Husqvarna, which she knows every little sound this baby makes. So let's go ahead and pop out the bobbin, pop in another thread so you get to witness that. And then we'll finish the last half or less that we have to combine the two pieces of the top quilt together. And then we are ready to show it off. It's so funny when you look at a quilt and it is laying on a bed. It looks so much different than hanging up, than the pieces that it was. And I don't know if it's something about just growing on me or what. I'm trying to show you the bobbin. I do apologize. It looks like we're winding a bobbin too here. So it's going to take just a minute. We're going to wind that bobbin. So we get it started. This is the Husqvarna, how you wind a bobbin. Very, very simple. Only a couple of little tricks to pop it through. Push that little lever over there so it winds. And then just push the foot pedal. And that little button there that I'm showing you with my finger is the one that, as long as it's pushed over, the sewing machine knows it's going to the bobbin and not making the needle go up and down. All right, so we did it a little loose without putting on all of our clips, so we've wound some of the bobbin around, but I mean the thread around our top thread, but now we're popping our bobbin back in, and we are so almost ready to go. Okay, and we wound it with a different spool, so the needle's already thread. We just popped our bobbin in there, and we are ready to finish up our quilt. So we're getting it back lined up. We're going to re-sew over the last inch and a half, and that way we're locking the stitches by stitching directly on top of them, and then continuing as we did before. And again, with the pins and the folding of the quilt top there, it makes it so much easier that we don't have to worry about the weight of the quilt pulling a direction we don't want it pulling in. So we have more control. And see how nice it is to pull the needle out, put it, or the pin out, put it right on its little magnet table. Just a real nice handy tool to have by your sewing machine, along with a pair of scissors and of course an extra bobbin, as we saw, to refill the bobbins when we need to. And notice how when we pull out our pins, we keep the one hand, our fingers on the quilt, so it's going smoothly. And we're at the end, so show and tell is about to commence.
I'll go figure out what to put on my first go round. I like a pale blue, I think. A pale color, anyway. You know, not white. Anywhere from cream to blue, green, whatever.
Some of the colors in the quilt.
Yeah, one of the colors in the quilt.
All right, my friends, and here we go is our finished quilt. We are very excited to let you see this beautiful quilt. We're going to bind it in some multicolor fat quarters that we showed you, and we are ready for the long arm. Very, very exciting. Again, 12 fat quarters, my friends. Easy quilt sliced in 3 different directions. You can do this. Thank you, Sylvia, for letting us come along on this journey of yours to create this very fast quilt in a day project.
You are welcome.